Hello, friends. Welcome to Storycraft. On this channel, you will enjoy world top stories. Let's view the video. The creepiest flight mystery in history. No one aged in 37 years. The flight that vanished without a trace was July 2, 1955, when Pan American Flight 914 took off from New York, bound for Miami, Florida. The day was clear, the skies calm, and the passengers had no reason to suspect anything unusual. Aboard the Douglas DC-4 were 57 passengers and 4 crew members, all expecting a routine, short domestic flight. Families smiled, children giggled, and the pilot, Captain Miguel Victor, gave a confident thumbs up as the aircraft taxied down the runway and vanished into the blue. But what started as a normal flight soon turned into the most chilling aviation mystery in history. Flight 914 simply disappeared from radar. Not a trace, not a signal, not a sound. Air traffic controllers were stunned. The plane had taken off smoothly, but mid-flight, it vanished as though it had flown into another dimension. Immediate search and rescue operations were launched. The Coast Guard, military, and even commercial vessels scoured the Atlantic for any signs of wreckage. Not a single piece of debris was found. No oil slicks, no floating luggage, nothing. It was as if the plane had never existed. News outlets exploded with headlines. Plane disappears in clear skies. No distress call from Flight 914, and mystery deepens as search fails. Families were devastated, demanding answers. Officials, baffled and embarrassed, could offer none. The aviation world was shaken. How could a massive aircraft with dozens of souls on board just vanish in mid-air? Theories emerged. Some said the plane had crashed into the sea and sunk instantly. Others suggested hijacking or pilot error. But none of these theories held water, especially given the lack of evidence. The airline quietly closed the case, listing the passengers and crew as presumed dead. Over time, people moved on, but the families never stopped grieving or searching for the truth. Decades passed, and Flight 914 became a tale told in hushed tones. Pilots shared the story in break rooms like a ghost legend, while conspiracy theorists held on to the idea that something far more mysterious had happened. UFO enthusiasts pointed to strange radar blips that occurred around the time of the disappearance. Others whispered about a time slip, a phenomenon where people or objects vanish into another time or dimension. What made the case so chilling was not just the disappearance, it was the total and utter lack of evidence. In a world increasingly ruled by technology, it was terrifying to think that a whole aircraft could simply fade from existence. As if something or someone had plucked it out of time and space. But the mystery was far from over. 37 years later, the unthinkable happened. A sudden reappearance. 37 years later, it was March 9th, 1992, in Caracas, Venezuela. The sun blazed over the city's bustling airport as air traffic controllers carried out their daily routines. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the radio, a pilot requesting permission to land. His voice sounded confused, as if unsure of where he was. The aircraft wasn't scheduled. The transponder wasn't registering in any known flight path logs. But the tower granted landing clearance. As the aircraft came into view, ground staff froze. The plane was an old Douglas DC-4, the same model that had disappeared decades earlier. It looked well-maintained, but visibly outdated. Its markings were those of Pan American Airlines, a company that had ceased operations in the early 1990s. The control tower radioed the pilot, requesting identification. His reply chilled the room. "This is Flight 914 from New York to Miami. July 2nd, 1955. The tower went silent. Confusion spread like wildfire. Security was called. The landing strip was cleared. The old aircraft touched down gently, its wheels screeching against the asphalt. As it came to a halt, ground crew approached, cautiously, unsure of what they were seeing. The aircraft's windows showed passengers inside, alive, alert, and seemingly normal. There was no sign of panic, injury, or aging. Everything looked preserved. When the door opened, Captain Miguel Victor emerged, visibly disoriented, but calm. He held a clipboard with flight details from 1955. "Where are we?" he asked a guard. "What is this place?" Airport staff stood in stunned silence. The passengers followed, blinking against the sun. Children clutched toys from the 1950s. Men wore hats and suits, women dressed in vintage dresses and heels. It was as though a snapshot of history had just stepped off a plane. One elderly worker dropped his radio in shock. These people hadn't aged a day. Authorities were notified immediately. The airport was locked down. Venezuelan officials arrived, followed by U.S. government agents within hours. The passengers were quickly escorted away for questioning, medical checks, and identity confirmation. Their records matched those declared missing in 1955. Fingerprints, dental records. Everything aligned. There was no doubt. These were the same people who had boarded Flight 914 nearly 4 decades ago. But nothing made sense. How had the plane vanished from U.S. airspace and landed safely, unchanged in another country 37 years later? The passengers had no recollection of time passing. "We were in the air," one woman insisted. "It was the same sunny sky. And then we were here." No one reported hunger, fatigue, or aging. Watches and calendars on board still marked the year 1955. The aircraft itself was also a relic. Its fuel hadn't degraded. The engine still purred like new. Even the flight logs showed no indication of delay or disruption. Everything inside the plane remained untouched by time. The world was left speechless. Media outlets weren't allowed near the scene. Families of the passengers were contacted under strict secrecy. But before the public could get real answers, the government declared the incident classified, and just like that, the mystery grew deeper. No one aged. The passengers were the same. Medical teams rushed in, expecting to treat elderly patients traumatized by an impossible journey. But what they found defied every scientific principle. Each passenger from Flight 914 appeared exactly as they had in 1955. No wrinkles, no signs of aging, no illnesses typical of their actual age. Men who should have been in their 70s still looked like they were in their 30s. Children remained children. Doctors performed physical examinations, blood tests, and cognitive assessments. The results were beyond comprehension. Their bodies showed no signs of degradation, no anomalies, and no cellular aging. Their biological markers matched their last known medical records from 1955. It was as if time had frozen for them mid-flight and resumed only upon landing. Their blood pressure, heart rate, and reflexes were consistent with individuals in perfect health, unusual even for the time they were last seen. Families who had mourned them for decades were brought in for private reunions under heavy security. Tears flowed, but confusion reigned. Some spouses had remarried. Some parents had passed away. Children who had grown old met their still young siblings. It was emotional chaos, joy mixed with disbelief. The passengers were overjoyed to be home, but could not understand the pain their disappearance had caused. To them, only a few hours had passed in the sky. One passenger, Helen Parker, had been 6 years old when the flight vanished. She stepped off the plane still clutching her doll, unaware that she was now older than her mother had been when they said goodbye at the airport in 1955. Her father, now 80, collapsed upon seeing her. "You haven't changed," he whispered, sobbing. "You're still my little girl." Some passengers were informed that everyone they knew had died. Others were told the world had changed drastically. They were shown televisions, smartphones, and computers. Their reactions were a mixture of wonder and fear. Many couldn't believe what they were seeing. For them, Elvis was still king. The Cold War was the greatest threat, and man hadn't yet walked on the moon. Psychologists were brought in to assess the mental impact. Surprisingly, most passengers remained calm, though disoriented. Some refused to believe they had been gone more than a few hours. One passenger, a young man named Robert Lane, angrily demanded to speak to the flight authorities. "If this is a joke," he said, "it's gone too far." But the evidence couldn't be denied. Public records, newspaper clippings, and family testimonies all pointed to the same shocking conclusion. The passengers had disappeared for 37 years, yet hadn't aged a single day. The world was different, and they were not. Government agents collected every item on the plane, from watches to newspapers to the aircraft's flight log. Everything was sealed, analyzed, and stored. The passengers were placed under strict monitoring in undisclosed locations. The question everyone feared to ask now echoed louder than ever. Where had they been for 37 years, and why hadn't time touched them? Government panic and the cover-up theory, as news of the mysterious flight began to leak, the government acted swiftly. Within hours of Flight 914's landing, the airport was closed off to the public. Military personnel arrived in unmarked vehicles, surrounding the aircraft and escorting the passengers to undisclosed facilities. Airport staff and air traffic controllers were detained for questioning and forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. Something had happened, something beyond explanation, and the authorities were desperate to keep it contained. Inside a hidden government facility, the passengers were separated and interviewed extensively. Each was asked the same set of questions. What did they see? What did they experience? Did they remember anything unusual? Any lights, turbulence, or strange occurrences? The answers were eerily consistent. None recalled anything strange. They all believed it was still July then 1955. There were no memories of lost time, alternate locations, or odd sensations, just a flight through clear skies, and then the sudden arrival in a strange land. The aircraft itself was seized and taken to a top-secret hangar. Experts from NASA, the Pentagon, and several international agencies were flown in. Every inch of the plane was examined. The fuel was still fresh. The electronics were outdated but functional. The food trays inside the cabin remained warm. It was as if the flight had just taken place minutes ago. But the flight data recorders revealed nothing abnormal, only a normal flight path, as if no gap of 37 years existed. Public curiosity exploded when rumors began spreading online. A few airport workers whispered to friends, and soon message boards were flooded with questions. What was this mysterious plane? Why was Pan Am, an airline long defunct, suddenly back on the radar? And why were people reporting government trucks at the Caracas airport? Then came the blackout. Suddenly, all online posts related to the incident were deleted. Blogs were shut down. News segments were pulled before they aired. Even international journalists who tried to investigate were denied entry or warned off. A Venezuelan journalist named Emilio Vargas, who claimed to have footage of the plane's arrival, disappeared days later without a trace. His home was ransacked, and his camera never found. The message was clear: stay silent. Conspiracy theorists had a field day. Some claimed the government was hiding a portal to another dimension. Others believed the passengers had unknowingly crossed into a military time experiment, perhaps part of a top-secret Cold War project that had gone horribly wrong. The most extreme theories suggested alien abduction and return, but no one could prove anything. Even families of the returned passengers were silenced. Those who spoke out publicly were met with government pressure. Interviews were canceled. Legal threats loomed. It became clear the U.S. and Venezuelan governments were working together to erase the event from public memory. But one thing couldn't be buried. A plane that vanished in 1955 had returned in 1992, untouched by time, and the world was never supposed to know. The unanswered questions that still haunt us. Years passed, but the mystery of Flight 914 refused to fade. Despite the government's best efforts to erase the incident, whispers continued in dark corners of the internet and among conspiracy circles. What force could suspend time for 37 years? Why were the passengers untouched by aging? And where exactly had the plane gone? Some believe Flight 914 entered a rift in time, a tear in the fabric of reality that briefly opened and closed. Others claim it was part of a secret military experiment gone rogue, perhaps a failed version of the infamous Philadelphia experiment. A few even argue that the aircraft and its passengers had been trapped in a dimension outside our known universe, only to be released when conditions aligned. But the biggest mystery was this. Why did the government go to such great lengths to hide it? Passengers, after initial interviews, were never heard from again. Some reportedly received new identities. Others were said to have vanished under protection programs. No photographs were ever released. No statements ever made. The aircraft itself was never displayed or documented. It was as if Flight 914 had never existed. Yet the radar logs, the eyewitnesses, and the few brave airport workers who spoke up confirm something real happened that day. And so the world is left with a chilling question. Was this a one-time event, or could it happen again? Because if time could forget Flight 914, what else might be lost in the skies? Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel Storycraft for more interesting videos.